Hello, podcast listeners. What is up? My name is Vinamre Kasanaa. If you don't know who I am, assuming you're listening on Spotify or somewhere else or watching on YouTube, this podcast episode is one of my most awkward and human and yet so endearing to me. The guest on was Dhrupad Karwa, who's truly, how do I say this without sounding like a school principal, who's truly a paragon of humility and fun and creativity. I mean, he's the CEO and co-founder of HaikuJam, a social writing game that has people from over 163 countries in 102 languages write haikus together. I think the community is 800,000 member deep, and about 40 million lines of haiku have been written. But you know, he's very well known in the startup world. He's in the Forbes 30 under 30 list, right? That's sort of the public image. But beyond that, it was very interesting to get to know him as a human being, and to sort of air our collective faults and our collective hopes together in this podcast and see what happens. We talked a fair bunch about stuff that I did not expect personally. I was gonna go in and talk about, a fair bit about productivity and attention spans and try to sort of make sense of, social media and loneliness. But we ended up jamming on a bunch of different things about reading, love, play, a fair bit about motorcycles and games. And Dhrupad is a fantastic conversationalist, because at certain points in the conversation, I felt like I was just asking canned questions, but he was kind enough and articulate enough to answer those questions. And he's definitely going to be a recurring guest on this podcast. I can tell you like this conversation a lot. I just don't know. I don't know any other way to sell it other than saying that. And if you haven't subscribed to this YouTube channel, or if you haven't, followed this podcast, please do that, because my guests are getting better, and I think without tooting my own horn, things are going well on my conversational front as well, despite the minor hiccups. So yeah, and
सोच ध्यान से पहले लंबी सी एक सांस ले, अंदर तेरे धीमी सी आवाज है जिसमें छुपे सारे बड़े राज है, इसी एहसास से खुलेंगे सारे रास्ते.
Yeah, what's up? And we're recording. What is up, Dhrupad Karwa? It's an honor to have you on here. You're quite the man to chase when it comes to doing podcasts, but I'm glad that we're finally doing it.
I'm so sorry, man. I'm awful with Instagram DMs, but thank you so much for having me. I've been excited, so let's do this.
Yeah, man. Fuck yeah. I usually give like a pretty extensive introduction at the start of my podcast sometimes. So, I'll save all the Forbes 30 under 30 details for that time. So, I mean, it's just very weird to sit with your guests and like, like blurt out their achievements while they just sit there like,
That's the boring stuff anyway. Let's get chatting.
Dhrupad, talk to me about this. Why is discipline a hedge against bad moods?
So you're quoting one of my recent tweets. I feel, okay, so I'm a pretty moody person, I feel. As in, for no apparent reason, I'll wake up in the morning and just feel like low.
Yeah.
Right. I've always been somewhat emotionally volatile, and creativity has been a great outlet for that. But I found that as I've just gotten a little bit older and working on products and companies and writing, you can't actually let your mood affect your agenda or your day. And that's where discipline and structure make a big difference. And you just have to turn up. Right? Turn up and get the work done, whether or not whether you feel like it or you don't. So that's why I felt building and cultivating discipline ensures that you almost transcend that mood layer where you can be feeling good or you can be feeling bad, but the work and the art is getting done. And that's the most important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a hard lesson for creatives to digest. The idea that, people don't care about your whims and how you feel. And
exactly,
it's a hard lesson, because you have to let go of that part of you that is also responsible for creating in the first place. That moody, that unconscious part of you, this well of inspiration that you derive your ideas from. But it also has its edges. It has its
right.
Yeah. So in that sense, what I find very interesting is that considering that, you've sort of understood that you're a creative and everything, and this discipline, I'm assuming it doesn't come easy. What things have you had to sacrifice as a result of cultivating this, right? Because in my room, as I'm sitting here right now, there are exactly two. I am a big poster guy, but I have no posters here because this is my childhood bedroom. But I do have this softboard where I've written down like this. I've stolen this line from Jocko Willink, which says discipline equals freedom. That's the only sort of theme in this entire COVID thing. And the other quote that I have up here is, be disciplined and orderly in your life so you can be violent and original in your work. And this is also stolen from Charles Bukowski.
That's amazing. I've heard that before.
Yeah. And so what I'm trying to do like this entire month and during this entire COVID period is to make sense of how is it that I can continue to execute while, leaving time for emotional relaxation, for release, for, screaming, all of those things, while still having that type A style day throughout the day. So talk to me about how you do that.
So I feel it's about almost aggressively scheduling it in, so I'm assuming that you brush your teeth every day, right? Mm-hmm. And you take a shower, right? And that's regardless of mood. That's regardless of how busy your workday is. It's absolutely fundamental. So you get it done. So I feel that you have to figure out what are the activities or the outlets that are fundamental to your mood regulation, to your productivity, to your creativity, and making them happen in the same way that you'd make brushing your teeth happen, and taking it as seriously and as fundamentally as that. Obviously, it's a lot easier said than done, but I feel like that mindset shift of taking it that seriously makes an enormous difference, and that helped me for sure.
Yeah. Your LinkedIn profile has a set of competitions that you did as a child, as a teen, around business and entrepreneurship, right? And so I find that interesting, and I find that bizarre in the sense that I never really knew that you could sort of excel in competitions for entrepreneurship. I mean, I've seen the concept from afar, and I was wondering if you could talk about how that was that a prep for the real world of entrepreneurship, or were you like smacked in the face about, oh shit, this is nothing like those competitions?
So I think for me, the actual entrepreneurial journey didn't begin with competitions at all. It actually started with an idea when I was 14
Let's go a couple
high
steps
school.
back and talk about how you were in school, because I think that's like my favorite question often is to like figure out, were you one of those kids who were like, a wallflower? Were you one of those kids who were like, super popular? Were you like, eating your own nose? Yeah, what do you call it? Boogers, right? Boogers.
Yeah. Probably a combination of those three. I don't know. I was always like a bit of a dreamer, I guess. I always I think I was really blessed to have a family where I was always encouraged to pursue my passions and interests. Which is, I feel in Indian families, it's not it's a bit of a rarity, right? So like I wasn't ever pressured or pigeonholed to be a certain kind of person or to follow a certain career. I think my dad, when I was a very, very young kid, those early messages and teachings were all around just finding out who you are and what it is that you want to do, and just do that, right? If it's art, it's art. If it's music, it's music. If it's sport, it's sport. So I was really lucky to have a super supportive family that just encouraged me to pursue my interests. So that's pretty much what I did. I used to write a lot as a kid, all sorts of random things, letters. So like I remember when I was like story that came to mind when I was 8 or 9. I was driving through my neighborhood in a town called Doncaster in England, in Yorkshire. And I asked my dad this question, like, why are some neighborhoods like really rough, right? We lived in a little bit of a roughish area back then. And I asked, like, why is this area, rough and unsafe and we can't go out at night, whereas other areas are like really nice and much safer? That doesn't seem fair. And he was trying to figure out, how do you answer that question to a 9-year-old, right? How do you explain like inequality to them? I really wasn't satisfied with whatever answer that he gave. and I said, well, who's in charge of this, right? Who would we need to speak with to solve this particular problem? And he was like, well, I guess you need to go to the mayor, right? And I said, okay, so if I have a chat with him, he'd fix it. And he said, well, it's a little bit more complicated than that. He needs to speak to a few other guys. And we went down this sort of like chain of command and hierarchy. And we eventually came to the prime minister, right? So my dad said, okay, he's the guy like running the country. And technically he has the power to make these kind of changes. So I thought, okay, great. So we just need to speak with him about this. And he was like, why don't you write him a letter? And the prime minister was Tony Blair at the time. So I went home and wrote like a 10-page letter with illustrations. And my dad actually helped me post that to Downing Street. And we got a reply, a really beautiful reply. It was also submitted in this, sorry?
Was it from his team, or was it?
I'm sure it was from his team. I mean, it had his signature, but of course, it was someone in his communications team. But it was a really empowering experience, right? It was just an example of like, you know, exploring and inquiring into a topic and empowering a 9-year-old to feel that, you know, his voice or her voice can be heard. So yeah, so for me, it was all just about like, it was pretty curious childhood. Like I always was doing creative things that intrigued me. And it led to building, you know, a small startup when we were 14 and a bunch of other things as well. So I never really, I don't think, I definitely was affected by peer pressure, and we can talk about that, and for sure. And I feel that's something like I consciously worked on when I was like 16, 17, 18.
Were you trying to edit out the influences of your peers deliberately? Was that what was happening?
I feel like I was just trying to fit in, right? And I realized that I was done doing that. I feel like, I mean, we had a quick chat about this in the pre-podcast conversation, right? Around how I was born in India. I moved to England when I was like 2-3 years old. And I was brought up in very much a culturally Indian household, but then I'd go to a school that clearly wasn't. And that was an amazing experience, a really diverse experience, but it did lead to conflicts and tensions and questions at times. So I feel like I was always working on fitting in. And also I feel there was some early influences that led to that. Like I went to 4 different junior schools. And some of them were like quite rough, and there were like, there was quite a bit of like racism. I wouldn't go as far as calling it bullying, because honestly, I don't feel like at the time I was that affected by it, and I had friends and we had a good time. But when I look back at certain incidents, I think, hey, that was kind of messed up. Like when I was 9 or 10, I had a knife pulled on me in school.
That is crazy.
By this guy's like older brother. And I honestly, I totally forgot about this until relatively recently. And I kind of shrugged it off at the time. I was like, okay, yeah. But then when I think about it, and you know, like there's that saying that the dots, you can connect them looking backwards. And when I see that, you know, that longingness just fit in and just go with it, I feel like some of those early influences definitely affected that.
Yeah, man. Isn't the UK notorious for stabbings? Like I find that over and over again. I was reading this book by this old conservative thinker. He was a psychiatrist in, I believe, in the 90s and the 80s. His pen name is Theodore Dalrymple. Like we have William Dalrymple here in India, right?
Yep.
This book called, you know, Life at the Bottom, the worldview that makes the underclass, right? And a lot of what he talks about is, and you know, since you've been a native of England, I don't know as much, but a lot of what he talks about is how in rough neighborhoods, right, the most common crime often has, you know, people robbing people at gunpoint, robbing people at knife point, which I found very weird because that usually is replaced by guns in the US and India and everywhere else. Yeah.
Difficult to comment because I've not seen any of I've not really kept up to date with the latest statistics and things, but definitely it's widely reported, right? Yeah. So it feels like it's a widely reported crime. And in my own experiences and, you know, network of friends, I feel like yeah, I could name a number of people who have been, not necessarily knife, but they've encountered such situations where someone was threatening them with a knife. Probably need to think deeper about why that is. I remember that even growing up, there was, when we were younger, there was this fascination with like Swiss Army knives. I even owned a little one at some point. I used it for like things like opening cereal boxes and lame things, but there was definitely a fascination about it and the craft around it. So yeah, maybe something to do with that.
Yeah, in school we used to have these. I mean, it was something that you showed off to your friends as a gadget. I was just opening my friend's board yesterday to, because we were rolling some weed and we were trying to get high, and I was like, "What is this?" He's like, "This is a Swiss knife," and I'm like, "I haven't seen this thing in decades," and it was weird. So I don't know why I brought that up. Okay, so your parents are immigrants. They moved from India to the UK.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
that's right.
Yeah. So you grew up in a culturally Indian household. What incidents / Indian rituals do you distinctly remember? Because I'm going to go off on a limb here and say that, I've often met people who are the children of immigrants in the US. And I find that, for them, it's they sort of have to work harder at preserving their culture, right? Because a lot of what is happening outside the world is not culturally heterogeneous. It's not the same, right? So they have to work harder.
Right.
So are there any rituals / objects that you remember from your childhood that were distinctly Indian that made you feel like this person who was, who could not fit in, who was separate? Like, did you guys do pujas and shit?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's possibly one of the biggest things. Like, my parents were pretty spiritually inclined, and they became a lot more spiritually inclined when I was relatively young.
Yeah,
so I was brought up in a household where my name is, my dad is a huge fan of ragas and Indian classical music. So that's where that came from. But yeah, I was brought up in a pretty spiritually inclined household. So I learned how to meditate when I was relatively young. And of course, your friends just think that's really weird, right? I remember one of my very close friends who I adore. He came to my house once and just noticed that at the time, I don't think we had any sofas at home, and there were just cushions. And he was really like, "Why do you just have a bunch of yoga mats and and cushions around your house? This is odd." So little things like that where it makes you realize that, okay, this isn't necessarily the norm. But other than that, not too many incidents coming to mind. I don't think it's one of those things where it wasn't a specific incident, but I think it was just a general cultural undertone.
I see.
Right.
Yeah.
And in fact, one incident suddenly does come to mind was when I was in junior school, again, probably 9-10 years old. And one of my aunties was visiting from India, and she was picking me up from school, and she was wearing a sari, right? And
interesting.
And little things like that where I felt quite subconscious there, and then ashamed of feeling self-conscious, and little tensions like that, which were kind of definitely littered through childhood. Also, I feel like the fact that no one can really pronounce your name, and you have to sort of anglicize your name a little bit. You talk about these things and they feel so small, right?
They're not.
They're not actually that small. They form very deep impressions and really affect your identity as you progress through life. So.
Yeah, I had 4 different names in college because I spent my parents travel frequently and they help us see the world that was bigger than the hometown that I inhabited, right? But never did I have to sort of change my name to make myself be understood by my peers. So what happened is when I went to the US for the first time, no one could pronounce my name. It was buttered up by they said stuff like Vinamre, right? And it just and my name has never been pronounced properly my entire life. So only a few people get it, and it's just this pain point, this lingering pain point. And so I thought, why don't I reinvent myself to put in and see what happens, right? Because this was fairly recent. I mean, this was fairly new to me, right? The idea that you're suddenly now in a new culture and you have to sort of not only just assimilate to a point where you're social and civil, but then also, eventually thrive and individuate, right? Because usually what happens with Indian kids, this is something that I've seen recurringly in US universities, is they'll go and they will instantly hunt for the Indians. They'll instantly look for safety numbers. And,
right.
And then they'll stay there for years, right? And then they come back. Their parents, their relatives will laud them as the foreign return. But they know deep down in their private lives that they really didn't mingle with the culture, because what they did was they sort of remained with their groups within the safety, right? So, but I didn't want that. I wanted this global experience that the conveniently named BU admissions department had, marketed to me, and I wanted to meet all these different people. So I was like, the first thing I have to do is sort of reinvent myself. So what can I do? And so I went with this name, Vin. So, it's like Vin Diesel, right? And I became Vin. Yeah. And it was weird because I wasn't used to being called by that name, and I would just, okay, I'm being called right now. That's my name. Okay. So I have to acknowledge that now. Okay. And then I was like, but this doesn't cut it as well. So, and then people, as you become friends with people and, you grow closer, they make nicknames. So Win became Vinny. I'm like, that still doesn't cut it. It seems like someone else. And then I think in my last year of college, I had this whole Steve Jobs emo phase where I was just wearing killing decision-making fatigue by wearing the same clothes every single day. And so that's when I became, writer pen name VK, which is the abbreviation of my name. And I really like that identity because it was nice to be addressed by using two letters, that it was just nice. And then eventually, by the time I was ready to return, I was like, you know what, I'm just going to go with the number and fuck it all. And so my accent, it came back to a sort of healthy negotiation between Indian and American. And, so did my identity. So it was really interesting to sort of see that, but it was not a small thing at all. It was something that was, I think almost all the time it was at the background of my mind.
Right.
Because you're thinking about it, like, how can I have a stable, consistent identity and then do other stuff? Instead, I have to constantly, and you would also see like people's reactions. It's like, oh, address me by this name now. Oh, okay. Yeah. So I have to look at you like in this light. But yeah,
it's like it's in the subtext of every conversation, right? And really affects your confidence as well, like how you project yourself into the world and how you even engage in conversations. So I really like what you said, that it's a healthy negotiation between accents. That's really interesting because it's always a tension, right? The way that you speak and how you speak, let's say in English, and do you sound Indian? Do you sound American? Do you sound British? And it's always like this interesting ensemble. And I think that should be celebrated. So I like the way that you said that.
Yeah, I also noticed that in your accent as well. I think you also have had that now because I can sense it. I mean, I sense that the root is English, like English, but I also sense that it has been Indianized to a point where you're accessible to the country that you're working in. So that's really interesting to see.
It's a really subconscious thing, but I'm a bit of a chameleon, I think, because and I'm not aware of this, but from speaking with friends, they tell me that my voice will change when I'm speaking to, let's say, my family members or friends in Bombay. It will change completely if I'm speaking to like my friends in South Yorkshire, and that's not something that's happening consciously. And I only found it out by, I think, I don't know if you find this, but I find it very difficult to listen to myself whenever you're given a talk or a podcast or anything. Like, it's great to have the conversation, but I'm done listening to my voice after that. I spoke with someone once, and I was shifting between accents because they were, and I was like, wow, that's really like, I don't know, schizophrenic in a way, but it is what it is.
Yeah, it's weird. What I do with that, and I hope this recipe helps you as well, is I listen to myself at 2x, so twice the speed. And that makes it like soup, like fodder for your ears. It's like, but you get the point. And you don't have to fret over your, let's just say your stupidity that much. But so this is sort of interesting in the sense that there's a fair bit of self-loathing that is, I think, I wouldn't want to make a general statement, but that is sort of part of, I guess, creating the creative process. Because what you're trying to do, at least when you're trying to write or, make sense or even speak, is you're trying to get a strand from your head, sort of like what Dumbledore does in Harry Potter, and then put it out, right?
Yeah.
And then, but that strand may not always stand the test of time. It may not be something that, you will ascribe to for the rest of your life. And so it's almost like you're looking at stuff that you're like, okay, I had that thought, let me move on, right? So I'm sure like there have been times in your life as well where, you've written stuff, you've done a speech that you are like, I'm done with that. I don't want to deal with that anymore. And I think, the ability to change your mind is like a superpower for people. So in that vein, could you talk to me about the Tibetan waiter? What's happening with that?
Oh my gosh, you've really read into some labyrinth on the internet. So so that was a novel in verse I attempted during university. Mm-hmm. It was directly inspired by Vikram Seth's The Golden Gate, which I'm not sure if you read, but I really recommend. It's one of my favorite books. It's a story about four friends in I think early San Francisco, and the entire book is written in verse, right? And it's remarkable because after the first like couple of pages, you stop noticing the verse and you're just in the story, and it's really something special. And really, I think I discovered that book at at an inflection point in my life as well. And I read it and I just wanted to write, I was inspired to write something similar. So I embarked on my own novel in verse, which was, which I called The Tibetan Waiter at the time. And it's one of the few things that I shelved, right? I normally love to see projects, whatever it is, through to the end, whatever end that may be. But this was something I consciously left alone. I think I got 50, 60% of the way through. It was also at a time when I was building HaikuJam, company I'm currently doing. It was the early days. So it was very difficult. I found emotionally to build a company, also to write a book and invest in a novel. And then also a lot of, I feel like the writing part was relatively easy, but editing a novel in verse was extremely difficult because of the rhyme scheme. So whenever there's a minor edit, it has an impact on everything else that is to come. And it became a really, really a gargantuan task. Actually, it was really, really complex and difficult. And I feel that the story became way too complex and it just wasn't good enough. I'd stopped believing in the plot. I felt, okay, it's become a little bit too cerebral. And I was trying, and it became, I felt like, when something's gone on for too long and you just feel lethargic and you just need to cut it and move on to new opportunities. That's how I felt with it. So I put it on the shelf and learned a lot from the process, but it remains unpublished. There was a little bit of publisher interest, actually. And that's an entirely separate conversation that we can have. And I feel that early publisher interest also corrupted the book a little bit, because then I started thinking about maybe I can get this published.
Right? You assumed an audience.
Exactly.
You had this,
and suddenly I wasn't
eyes peering over your, over your shoulders, right? Looking at the manuscript as you were writing it.
Exactly. There was a moment where I was through a little bit of serendipity, I was connected to the Michael Dobbs, who's the author of The House of Cards, which is the Netflix series. So it's House of Cards is actually based on a novel, right? A trilogy. And I met with him and he read the first 4 or 5 chapters and connected me to his agent because he really liked it. After that, I thought, whoa, this is crazy. And I feel like the work probably took downhill after that. It wasn't just an expression of me or writing for myself. It was writing for, the destination as opposed to the journey. And I learned a lot from the process, for sure. No regrets at all. I learned a lot about myself, the creative process and writing through that project. So.
Yeah, isn't Tim Ferriss says something along to that effect. He says, if you're trying to write a book, you can just write a book. You can't do something else. That's priority number 2. And yeah, it's fascinating to talk about, projects that you just almost made, but then you were like, fuck it, let's go on to the next thing. Yeah, I've had a bunch of projects like that. I've had like this weird web series blog that we started in 2014 when it was called the Urban Armpit. We still have the Facebook page. It still keeps collecting Facebook likes, years after we killed it. It was basically like this journey of these three characters who were all based on different castes in India. Because we used to, I mean, in my city, caste is like a huge thing, and we make fun of it instead of trying to like sort of look at it as this, oh shit, it's a social evil. I mean, it is a social evil, right? But we poke fun at it and look at it from different perspectives. So in this particular series, it was three characters. One of them was, a baniya, which is typically like your, fat businessman, right? And he was sort of like the kingpin. The other guy was like a Kshatriya, Gujar, right? Who's, more involved in fighting, that sort of thing. And the other guy was like, an immigrant from Punjab. And he was like the son of a rich man who did cocaine, all those things. And these were like just stupid tropes that we thought out. And it was in the era of people not reading a lot of blogs. So my friend and I, we did this. We would just get high, write the first episode, put it out, and then just invent the story for the next week. It's like, oh shit, we have to write an episode. And people loved it. We had like 5,000 views on our website the first day. In that time, it was intense. But we just realized, fuck it, man. We don't know where we're heading with this. We're just like writing down episode names like they're Bollywood B-grade movies. We have to do something else. And
right.
And so college happened, school happened, and now that we look back at it, we are surprised by how much of what we do today is directly influenced by that time. The skills we built to sort of create in front of the public, create in the public eye, right? Which is different from creating in solitude. It's like you're trying to create something, and then you're seeing reactions, and then you're building on top of that, and so on and so forth.
I really respect that, actually, because I think it's relatively easy to shelve something that's not working. But when there's a glimmer of success, quote unquote, I think that requires real courage and insight and even vision to let it go. So kudos to you, because especially if like it was a good time to be doing things like web series and putting out content like that. And if you had the foresight to actually say, this isn't who I am, or this isn't ultimately where I want to go. I think that's I always respect that kind of decision making.
Yeah, I don't know. I think we were more interested in getting high, but I appreciate that. Yeah. So Dhrupad, tell me about this. Have you experimented with psychedelics?
Nope.
So what is
never.
it? I know for a fact that you are a serial meditator. I know that because, based on this conversation, your tweets, saw a picture of you with the Art of Living guy. I forgot his name.
Gurudev Shri Ravi Shankar. Yep.
Yeah. My apologies if I, just.
No, it's okay.
Yeah. So what sort of meditation do you practice?
So I practice the Sudarshan Kriya technique, which is taught by the Art of Living. And that's something I experienced when I was like 13, 14, and have pretty much since then been practicing that technique. And it's actually not a meditation technique. It's like something that prepares you to enter a state of meditation, right? So it's a very, very powerful rhythmic breathing technique that involves a number of different steps, pranayams, and different preparatory techniques. And then a very, very powerful rhythmic breathing, which is called the Sudarshan Kriya. And then following that, then essentially it helps you dive deeper into a state of meditation. And then then I practice something called the Sahaj Samadhi meditation after that, which is, I have my own, it's a mantra based meditation. It's something that you don't actually articulate, but you just take a few times. You don't need to take it more than a few times, and that helps you dive deeper. So that's been something that I've been doing for a number of years now. But ultimately, I feel like meditation is beyond, a specific kind of technique or school.
Of course.
For me, it's like, there's enough conversation today around why, like, the sort of tangible benefits of, being more focused, a clearer mind, being more creative. But for me personally, I feel like it's the only way I have a conversation with myself. It's like the most intimate inquiry into yourself. And I still feel that the most precious part of my day is that, 1 hour towards sadhana as opposed to, anything else. So
I think you're dropping gold, my friend. That is that is a testament to everything that goes wrong when it's like I use this example often. I don't know how many times I've said this on this podcast, but it's like like those toys that have a key in the back, and so you rotate that key and the toy moves forward, right? And so I find that without meditating, you just have that key wound up too tight, and so when you release that, and the toy just runs as fast as it can, right? And that's what I feel with meditation. If I don't meditate for 3 days or 4 days, right, I start to lose the plot. I start to get reactive. I start to have, like extreme anger and stuff. I mean, fucking but when I meditate, it sort of helps to distill the moment and find the center, right? Wherever the center is. And I find that even when I'm writing, when I'm not meditating, the writing is often just, like a teenager spitting out like, this fucking sucks, that fucking sucks, I hate this, I hate that, oh my God, this is horrible, blah, 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 so on and so forth. And then when I meditate, I'm like, I'm being riled up for no reason, right? And so it's a weird lesson that I still refuse to learn, despite the overwhelming benefits. But the days that I meditate, I'm like, holy shit, I should do it every single day. But then, 2 days pass and I'm back at it again. It's weird. It's very, very weird. I've done the Vipassana meditation technique, and that was intense. And probably one of the best experiences of my life. My parents keep shitting on me, saying, "Where's your Vipassana now? You're being reactive." Blah 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 blah. And it's that just makes me like, fuck, man. And so as much as I meditate, I also do this thing sometimes where I'll just have like a bad day, and I'll drive around in my car and I'll scream as fast as I can, and it's so cathartic, man. Just like let it all out.
Right.
Yeah.
There's the operative word there I feel is you said. Distillation, right? Because I feel that's exactly what it does for me. There's so much complexity in our lives externally and even internally, and within a few short minutes, it distills and cuts through that complexity, and you reach that a space of essence. And that space, I feel, is a very, very powerful place, right? It feels like there's something within us. I feel like it's beyond time and it's unchanging, right? So for instance, if you were to think back to when you were 10 years old or 15 years old, right? You were, of course, a very, very different person back then. You had different thoughts. You had a different worldview, I'm assuming. But there's something in you that's unchanged, right? Throughout that entire time, there's some essence within you that's you. And that has not been touched by people, situation, things, experiences. It's absolutely preserved. And I feel like most of us forget that. And meditation helps you get into that space, and that space of like purity. And it's really special.
Yeah. That's what Socrates says about is his inner demon, right? That the voice that always tells him what not to do, and how that voice, always is there, but you just sort of suppress it. And then that's when, that's when what's also really interesting is I remember reading something on brain pickings, that famous website that curation.
I love it. It's amazing. Yeah.
Maria Popova is a legend. And so it had some author who was talking about how there is not a difference between the 7-year-old you and the 70-year-old you. Like you're ideally the same. And the one thing that I like to do a lot now is to try and read old journals from when I was from when I was a kid or when I was a teen, and to see thoughts more incoherency, less articulation, but to try and read between the lines of what I was feeling at that time. I see a lot of teenage angst, I see a lot of hope, I see a lot of ambition, I see a lot of loathing, I see a lot of insecurity, I see all of that, right? That's stuff that you usually don't publish unless you get super famous, and then someone digs through your drawers and they're like, like journals of Hunter S. Thompson, this is what he was writing, right? But most of it is just like private material. And so but what it also has helped me with is it's allowed me to smile. I mean, you have like a nice wine glass and you dare to read something that you wrote in 2013, and you dare to read that entire year, and you see like, oh, this is who I was. And the reaction that I have is love, compassion, and sympathy for the child. And so I don't know, what do you feel like when you read your old writings?
I think exactly how you feel. I mean, I thought it was beautifully expressed. I feel like compassion, vulnerability, and I almost want to tell that person that it will be okay. You know, like it's gonna be okay. Like just keep the course. You're okay. And it's something really interesting, right? Because I feel like life never really goes to plan, right? And as kids, you have these lofty, not even ambitions, but dreams, right? Like people want to become astronauts, or they want to like see the world. And rarely does it ever work in the way that you imagine, even if you're doing the work that you feel that you were destined or you dream to do. It's never that, and we talked about this a little bit earlier. I feel like the destination is never as sweet as you think it's going to be. Yeah. And which is why like the juice, the richness of it, I feel lies in the journey itself. So I know that whenever I've read like old diaries and journals, there's a bit of like, there's a sense of feverishness in them. Like I need to get to this point, right? Or there's a sense of like self-loathing that, I'm useless, I can't do anything, and this is not working out, and blah, blah, blah. You know, there's this like, this stream of consciousness. And I just feel like I want to tell that person, you're actually loving it, stick the course, because the journey itself is where where the happiness lies, not actually in arriving.
I started this thing. I started the Morning Pages journal, which is
it's amazing. Julia Cameron, like life-changing.
I haven't read the book. I just heard about the concept from Tim Ferriss, and I figured, let me just try that out. And I posted this on my Instagram, and people reached out saying that they also want to do that. I'm like, fantastic. There's clearly a lot of people who want to get behind unstructured writing. Once you eliminate the need to make it for an audience, once you make it a private affair, people will write all sorts of crazy things, right? And then you will realize, oh fuck, maybe I'm a sadist, maybe I'm weird, maybe I'm a psychopath, right? It's and my Morning Pages journal is just the first 10 pages is all that anxiety uncoiling itself on paper, is all that neuroses just coming down on paper, right? And despite the fact that I've been writing, more than most people, more than the average person, my entire life, despite that, right? And it's this blind fixation on certain things. It's like this fixation for my ambition, like I should do something for the podcast. Fuck this, fuck that, right? And then the beautiful thing about a habit like that is, as you find the courage to read through those dastardly pages and like, oh my God, what an idiot I am, right? You eventually come to a point where you'll find every 20 pages or so, every 10, 15 pages or so, at least for me, there's a little clarity. There's a little settling. There's a little point where you're like, this makes sense. This is almost articulated enough that I can publish it, but no, I'm going to let that be and keep moving on. And then so what happens is it goes, in like a graph, right? And it's very, very amazing. I mean, I have found that this can be used as material to be extrapolated on later on in life, right? But the thing is, it's the same idea as rewriting, right? 95% of it is absolutely garbage. You're the same old neuroses that you always have, right? The same few issues that you fixate on. But then those things that you find are, truly amazing, you'll find that you still have to go through the tough task of having to start off those thoughts and then write an entire thing on that and then re-edit again and again. And so, I don't know, like my whole journey with this entire COVID-19 thing is to give writing like a serious shot and become like a serious writer as opposed to, dicking around about it and stuff. And so I'm wondering, do you still find time to write?
Yeah. I try and budget the first couple of hours of my day towards writing, whether it's a fiction project or pages or, journals or whatever it may be. And pages is something I do like not every day anymore, because there's only so much you can do in a day. But I find like on the weekends, I do pages because, as you said, it's, what I love about it? You actually drop the label of writing, right? It's not writing really. Yeah, it's like, you're plugging in a wire to your subconscious and just turning the on switch. And that's what pages is. It's this gush of stuff. And within that gush, I find that there are gold really golden insights. And some of the best ideas I feel like come out through pages. You've just got to mine and dig around. And, it's interesting. My mother has recently started doing morning pages. So she's someone who she's always like self-identified as someone who can't write, who doesn't really have original thoughts, and has had like confidence issues expressing her point of view because she felt that I'm just not a creative person. I'm not a particularly intelligent person. And I feel like one of my submissions in life is convincing her that she is creative. And one of the most, I think, rewarding and meaningful pieces of feedback we got on the HaikuJam app that we built and we scaled to over 1 million people was actually from my mom. She felt like it was a place where she could write and express herself. And I thought, wow, we're really onto something if we could convince you to do that, right? And not just because she's my mother. But yeah, more recently I taught her how to do pages, and she's been doing it for like the last 10 days. And she said she just writes every single day. And I just noticed in our last few conversations how she had the confidence to use certain words that she wasn't perhaps using before. Her thoughts were like, visibly like flowing. And she was able to articulate herself in a way that she didn't feel comfortable before. So yeah, I feel like combined with meditation, it's a really powerful, like almost subconscious stack, right? I feel like meditation takes care of the really, really deep, unarticulated things happening. And morning pages is just a layer above that, which is not exactly the conscious mind, but the realm of like words and speech. And that's always like muddled and complex. And as you said, riddled with neuroses, and it helps just clear that up. So
yeah, fucking A. I'm so glad that your mom is on that train. One of my missions as well, and that's why I related to that, is to not necessarily empower my mother, because she is empowered already in the sense that she's insanely creative, insanely creative, but she doesn't have the same outlet that I have, like expressing it through a variety of mediums. Right. And I just say she didn't have the necessary tools to transform it from this raw creativity that is, that far exceeds mine and everyone else I know, to something that's more tangible, more sort of sellable, more sort of, readable, accessible, that sort of thing. But it often comes out in our own projects. Like if I really ask my mother like about her advice, she'll give me the opinions that, like some fucking Harvard psychologist who's like a PhD in creativity cannot, or even like, and because she has that in her. But so one of my projects is to somehow, and this is like later in life, is to figure out a way to make what she thinks accessible, and show her thoughts to the world. And the second thing is, considering that, your mom started morning pages. My dad, who is, let's just say, he's a consumer store of neuroses. That's the way to describe it. Because he's insanely productive. He's a businessman, knows how to make money, all those things. But the one thing that he had a blind faith on is his ability to rationalize, optimize, make calculations all in his head. And I'm like, your head is working overtime. You do realize that, right? Because you're here, but you're not here, because you're constantly making calculations, all those things that you need to find a release. You need to either speak through things or write them down. And he was so resistant. But I'm a persistent motherfucker, as you've known, with this podcast. And so what I did is I kept like sending him like these little like emails from different newsletters that I follow, and I kept whenever he is seeking my advice, I will just pour out everything I can with the hope that one day the resistance will break, and he will see that writing through your thoughts will be a great way will be a great antidote to not being so overworked. And then finally, a couple of days ago, he said, okay, bring me a diary, I'm going to do that. And he was telling me yesterday how it's made an impact. And he's not like, like us, where he's trying to, use Rome research to articulate our various projects and, follow a bunch of complicated productivity methods, but it's a simple to-do list. It's thoughts that he's penned down, and it's made a massive difference. And I'm so really happy, if you can sort of use your passions and turn them around to help your family. I think that's, to me at least, that's more
Yeah.
rewarding than doing it for the world.
I think change really starts at home and in your local environment before you look to scale it, right?
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. So let's talk about scaling for a sec.
Sure.
You know, you have this idea about HaikuJam. You were bored. You were going through a breakup. You wrote a line. Your best friend wrote a line in the haiku, and then suddenly HaikuJam happened, and you knew that this was a great idea. What criteria do you have in your head when you think about, is this worth scaling, right? Or can I be happy with this just being a, like a 10-person company as opposed to a 20-person company? And so with HaikuJam, did you ever have like basically like something in the road that says, okay, at this point I will stop, or at this point this will be enough, right? And the only reason I ask this question is because, considering that I'm assuming you're in your late 20s, right?
Yeah, I'm 28.
28, right? So to me, I find that the streak of ambition, if you're ambitious in your 20s, can go so unchecked that you forget that, sometimes you're just miming other people's goals. And that really happens when you're immersed in a certain world. Let's say that could be the writer's world or the startup world or the podcasting world, right?
Yeah.
And so there's all these people with all their public goals, and you feel like I have to be at that certain level or to at least have the credibility to then have the conversation that I want to have. So let's talk about that.
Wow, a lot of really big questions, difficult to unpack. I feel
that's my universe is coming out.
Yeah, we should have a pages session right now. I feel that people really complicate things like growth and scaling, and ultimately even the notion of scaling. What does it mean? It means that something is spreading from one person to another person at a time. And
right.
As we've seen during this pandemic, bad things can scale very quickly. And of course, there are good things can scale as well. But ultimately, it starts with the individual person, that almost like a monomer, the initial unit. So I feel like with any idea, it starts with, do I like using this product, right? Do I love this? Does this make me light up? Does this make me happy? And if the answer is yes, the likelihood is that it's probably going to make other people happy as well, because you are not that unique. There are other people like you in the world. There are probably a lot of other people like you in the world. And they're crying out for, the thing that you are working on, and there is a lot of like latent need for what it is that you're doing. So it wasn't a case like ever that this is enough, that I don't think I don't really think in terms of endpoints ever. If something ends, it ends, but I don't have like a tangible endpoint in mind that this will be enough. I think also, like, philosophically, and we've touched upon this before, you are either enough right now in this moment or you are not, right? Getting to a level of scale will not make you feel enough. I remember our first like serious fundraise for the company. We ran out of money on like 3 or 4 occasions, and we were literally, like scraping the bucket just to pay for the servers and to keep it going. It was really like it was a very challenging year, very challenging couple of years, actually, not just 1 year. And I remember some moments I just felt, oh man, if only we raise this capital, everything will be great after that, right? Everything will be fine. And I will be like happy, and we can build this in the way that we want to. And you realize that that's just such a myth. Right? As soon as you reach a level of scale, the context of the problem and the context of the anxieties just change, right? It's no longer about, can I pay the server bill? It's like, how do you manage a team of like 15, 20 people? Are they happy? People are looking to leave. They're going to Google or whatever, right? It's a completely different context of the problem. So yeah, you're either happy with yourself in this moment or you're not. It's as binary as that. And scaling, I feel a lot of it's just, partly philosophical, partly tactical. Like, is there sometimes you have a very clear addressable market for what it is that you're working on, and you're going after that market. So for instance, we're building a new product right now called Inspo. And it's inspired by everything that we've done with HaikuJam.
From your team that had you that had you as the forward in that, and I forget the name, but this guy was saying, can we get on an onboarding call next week? And I haven't replied
Andy,
yet.
my co-founder. Yeah. Yeah. So Inspo, it's still in private beta. It's a search engine for inspiration, powered by natural language processing, and all the work that we've been doing over the last few years. It's really interesting. And totally forgot why I brought this up. What we're discussing.
Because we were talking about scaling, and then
right.
Yeah,
addressable market. So for instance, with Inspo, we know that, okay, there are right now, there are around 40 million creative freelancers in the world, right? And many of them could get a lot of value for this product for a lot of their creative work and creative projects. Now, we do believe there's a much broader use case than that as well, but we have a clear idea of who that initial early adopting customer is, right? With an idea like HaikuJam, we didn't really have that clarity, right? People aren't waking up in the morning and thinking, man, I'd love to write a poem with two strangers today, right? No, other than me, I don't think anyone was thinking that. So we realized, but at the same time, there was this latent need for connection, right? There was this latent need to be heard and to express yourself. I don't think it's enough just to create and put yourself out there. I feel there are plenty of ways that you can create content today, and yet there aren't many ways where you can feel truly heard by either a friend or a stranger. So, I feel like, scaling, it's a complex one. I really, a lot of this stuff I feel that I'm still figuring out. I know that I personally just feel that if quality can scale, and if you're building something beautiful, replace the word scale with share, right? If you're building something meaningful, it's nice to share that with other people, right? Whether it's 1 billion people, 1 million people, 100,000 people, I feel like that's important, and good work should be shared. So
I love that. That's one of those things that, life coaches will say at those self-love seminars, where you change a certain word and then suddenly the NLP of something changes? I forget. I'm a dilettante in all of these things. Okay, so the one thing that I've been obsessing over the last couple of days in this pandemic is I was trying to create content and then see where it leads to. But I've always had this lingering hypothesis based on several readings and then taking a class in puppetry, building stuff that I used to build back in when I was a kid, and then now. My friend is building this indoor rock climbing wall, and he's going to hate me for this because I've juiced everything I can. I've juiced all the lessons out of it, and I've been juicing them for the last couple of days. I've been churning out whatever I can to show just how important this thing is in this moment of time. But he's building an indoor climbing wall, and he said, why don't you come help me? And my Tim Ferriss type A self-thought of, is this productive? Is this going to waste my time? Right. But there's another part of me that said, fuck it. It's going to be fun building this wall, and, you let me climb it. So that's good. And so I went there, considering that, where in India, blue collar, hold on for a sec. I don't know why my Zoom disappeared. Yeah, my bad. In India, blue collar work is often done by people who are traditionally, street migrant workers, right? That's generally the idea. Carpentry, painting, those things. And so he had someone, cut the wood and fix all the pieces together, but he was like, let's paint it. And so we deliberated over what we were going to paint on it for a while. And I said, oftentimes you will think that you have artistic skill, but then when you go out and execute it, it's going to look like shit. And you will justify it by saying, oh, this looks creative, but you're just going to hate the fact that your friends, you call over your friends and they made a mess and now you have to climb over this thing. So we went with a very safe color scheme that worked out brilliantly. But what I want to get at is what happened in the 2-3 days that we painted it together is this unusual sense of camaraderie, this unusual sense of cooperation, this unusual sense of almost like, your body movements coordinating, this sort of worker-like joy, a sense of constantly being in the flow. And so when we rose up from the task and we decided to have some wine, we realized that we were completely immersed in the task, and we hadn't had a single moment to think. and so I started to believe, what is it about building stuff with people, like building physical stuff with people, that is so powerful? And then I started reading Sebastian Junger's Tribe, which is a book about how veterans and army people in the army and people who've been through war have a tough time settling back into modern society with its with some of its individualistic notions and sort of disregard for our more tribal instincts. And that's why I liked about what you said about sharing, right? And so what I want to get at is how are you trying to, like you said in the start of the podcast, how are you're trying to like do stuff at the intersection of creativity and technology, and this thing, even though it was not technological, I mean, we are documenting the process to put it up later on our Instagrams, but it very much brought us together in a way that copious amounts of trips all across the world and endless J's, joints together have not done. So,
wow, that's a really wonderful story. So I feel there's two aspects to this that immediately come to mind, and they're both, I'd say, two almost innate human truths. And the first is that people want to be brought together, right? And they need a powerful context to be brought together. And the second is that we are innately creative, right? It's not something that it's not a superpower that only belongs to a few. I think it's absolutely innate within us. We're born into creativity, right? As kids, we don't label ourselves as artist or non-artist. We all draw on the walls. We tell stories. We run around and play and create characters and live in this really imaginary, fictitious plane, right? But then life happens, and somehow life convinces us that that's not important anymore. That's a waste of time. That's not going to propel your career or help you make it through those exams, right? So if we think about the story that you've just shared, ultimately those two kind of truths were just manifesting, right? One is you guys needed a context to be brought together, and context do matter. And I feel that there is a hierarchy within those contexts, right? Some are more powerful than others. So you could take a passive trip around the world, which could be incredible, but doesn't actually bond you because it's just passive, right? And you're just roaming, aimlessly. Or you could say, okay, we're going to sit in a garden and paint a wall, right? And that's beautiful. That's a really powerful context to actually bring either friends or strangers together. And the second is, you guys are, innately creative and expressive, and regardless of quality, regardless of outcome, I feel like it's who we are. And, you can always choose the medium that you choose to express yourself in. It could be in podcasting, it could be painting, it could be in, anything for that matter. But I feel like it's an interplay of those two kind of forces. At least that's the way I think about it. Yeah.
So what do you do when you're not involved in the business side of things? What are your hobbies in the sense? I mean, considering that, writing is something that can naturally be fueled into what you do, because, it's a part of your business as well. How do you play? Because this is something that has, struck me more times when I talk to people is that you will find that once the camera turns on, once the work mode turns on, a lot of that inventiveness gets lost in the practicality of things. And I am a big believer of practicality, considering that my sun sign is a Capricorn and all of that. So I really believe in structure and all those things. But I find that the best like you had a tweet, right? The best conversations happen when you're not broadcasting them. And so fuck, I lost my train of thought. What I'm trying to say is that what do you do for play?
Great question. So I'm working on fiction projects just for myself that have nothing to do with company. That have nothing to do with. It's almost like a creative therapy for myself. Creating these worlds and living in them for a few hours a day. It brings a lot of meaning to my day. So I'd say where I'm spending the majority of my time right now. I also feel, I mean, this is an interesting point around structure. I've always struggled with this notion of like compartmentalization. Because I never like, I never really got it, right? For me, work always had to be playful, right? I just can't do something that like doesn't make me feel alive or make me light up. I just can't do it. Like even as a student, I had this issue where like if I didn't enjoy a subject, I just wouldn't go. I do the bare minimum just to like get through, but I've always struggled with like, I've always had this kind of personality where I'm all in or I don't commit. Right. It's 0 or 1. Like and for me, like work is honestly play. Obviously there's a lot of aspects of any job, and I'm sure you feel this as well. Like you're living your dream, you're having these amazing conversations, and you're building this platform. But there are parts of the work that you'd probably rather not do, right? Or just like
or that
the administrative.
Yeah,
exactly. Right. And that's just the case with anything that you do. But generally speaking, the work itself, it's playful and it's fun. And I feel like it's in more recent times, I've not really been thinking about work versus play versus product versus tech versus this. I feel like everything is just an inquiry into something, right? It's either an inquiry into like, so for right now, I'm thinking, especially because of our new product, we're inquiring into like inspiration itself and where it comes from, and the power of like associations, associative thinking, and creativity. So like, and I feel that when I look at how I spend my time in a day or in a week, everything is an expression of that inquiry. In my personal life, I'm writing stories, right? And that is an inquiry into imagination, into creativity, into world building. And in the professional startup life, you're also telling stories, right? You're telling stories to investors, you're telling stories to customers. And it's just a different manifestation of that. So that's how I like to think of it, just because it works for me. I know that other people love to like turn off work. And I do believe that's important because, you do need to switch off. That is absolutely important, because you're not even doing your best work if you're constantly on. But I do struggle to, because I enjoy it. I really love it.
Yeah, I love having your obsessions bleed out into whatever you do. Like I'll have these weird hypotheses that I want to stress test throughout the week or a month, right? And I'll keep saying the same things again and again to the same people in different ways to see if it holds true. And it's this sort of what you described, this sort of search for what is the truth, right? And how many people can aggregate responses from to arrive at that, and then how much of my intuition can I mix with that to find something that I can use as a pillar to stand or place my projects on, right? It's like you're looking for something that can, if not perennial, that maybe in a working hypothesis that you can use to propel yourself forward for the next 3, 4, 5, 6 months, right? And it's really weird. This is how sort of tweets come to me, because you were talking about inspiration, right? I find that I wasn't native to the platform. Like I wasn't on Twitter until this year, when I was like, okay, let's see what this thing is about. And I was at the first few people I followed, I saw the way they tweeted, right? And I figured, okay, there's a template here, right? There's clearly a template of doing this. And so what they're doing is something along the lines of, say unarticulated human truths in the shortest way possible. So that, and so you sound profound, or maybe you're actually profound. And then people retweet it or like it, right? And I started doing that, and I was like, oh, it's sort of working. I see what's happening, and then, so I wanted to sort of play this game with you, where I was on a walk this morning and this tweet came to me. And it's funny that, never before in my life had I have to utter this sentence. I was walking and this tweet came to me, right? But that's what I am. Usually it's thoughts, but now it's like, okay, can I Twitter this thought? Can I tweet this thought? And so the thought was something like, if you're agreeable in conversation and disagreeable in your head, you're not disagreeable. You're just passive aggressive. And I was like, that is fucking brilliant. I'm going to put that out as a tweet.
Wow. Wow, that's profound.
See, that's exactly my point. But the thing is, I don't know, because I feel like all of the stuff on there, like a lot of it is just stuff that sounds witty, but it might not be witty. It's just, obvious. So if you were to, and you can totally fuck it up and say, I don't want to play this, but if you were to like sort of make up a tweet right now that sounds intelligent, doesn't have to be, then what would you do? Let's try to like construct something.
So top of mind for some reason, since we were talking about compartmentalization, I thought about time management and how the way that a person could, should manage their time is by, one, identifying the actions that create leverage, that create maximum leverage, and then you basically put all your time into those actions.
Yeah.
So might be bullshit, but and I had this visual of like, if your actions are like bowls and you have these different singing bowls or prayer bowls or whatever, and your time is this liquid and you have to decide like, where am I pouring this? And you want to pour it into the areas that are creating like compounding gains and effects. Yeah.
Yeah,
I have no idea.
I want to applaud you for that, because I just put you on the spot, and that was good. And so this ties into the idea of focus, right? Because what you're roughly talking about is focus, and so what I find is it's almost like how you sharpen a pencil with a sharpener. You can sharpen your tweets, because you can start off with this basic idea that you have, but then it's like, okay, so if I just put my focus on there, I can get better, and then suddenly you have this really sharp piece of persuasive writing that you can use as sort of like a way to persuade the world of the veracity of an idea that you have. It's really, really interesting. I'm trying to make more sense of Twitter and see like how I can make best use of the platform without falling in the trap of just being great at writing short sentences and not getting that whole trap of there's this one guy on Twitter, how Naval Ravikant tweets, but I think he's sort of the original OG of Twitter templates, because he speaks in that manner and he writes in that manner, right? And then I see all these people who imitate him in some degree, right? And I'm also guilty of that at some extent. And suddenly I'm seeing this whole trend of people who are just doing the same thing, and they're all like pointing out these human truths and the shorter the sentence, the more it sort of hits. And I'm like, what sort of high horse are you sitting on, my friend? Yeah, I don't know. It's, what do you make? What do you make of Twitter?
So a few things. One is, and I think you really like this. So when the first person I ever shared the idea for HaikuJam with, who is a mentor, he said that for him, a haiku was a tornado in a proton.
Interesting.
And like, forgive the pun, but that like blew me away. I was like, wow, that's a remarkable metaphor, right? It's a big whirlwind of an idea in these small 3 lines. So that came to mind, because that's exactly what a tweet is as well, potentially as well, right? It's this, as you said, this complex, grisly, unarticulated truth that's somehow been distilled and condensed. So anyway, that came to mind. Regarding your question and thoughts, I feel like we've touched upon this before in the conversation. There's always this tension between like authenticity, originality, and tactics and strategy, if you will, right? And I feel that's manifesting in what you just said, right? On the one hand, it's a beautiful platform to almost like openly journal, right? Like that thought you had in the morning. It's a remarkable thought, right? You can scrutinize it and you can realize that, oh, this maybe isn't as profound as I thought, or this won't inspire engagement, right? And that's where like that's a tension, right? It's just a very real problem, not just on Twitter, but anything we do, any content or product that we're building. Like, how do you preserve their essence, whilst also being tactically smart, and play, all of this is a game. Twitter is a game, building a product is a game, social media is a game, and you have to decide to what extent you want to play that game and how much do you want to win, because in the pursuit of that victory, you can also lose like what actually made you quite original. And I feel that the sanity check is you just got to run on yourself. Is it helping you think better?
Yep.
Right. And if it's not, there's no point. There's no point, man. It's just like, again, if the medium isn't actually helping you grow creatively or intellectually, spiritually, whatever, there's no point.
Yeah, it's a very weird tension between consuming and then thinking in solitude, and that's what I think about a lot. What are your media consumption habits like? Are you someone who's constantly consuming, even though you've aggressively edited out what you consume? But even then, are you consuming and reacting? Or are you spending time alone and then thinking about your hypothesis, or are you exclusively reading from books, right? Like what are you? Because I know for once that you're not, like I see that you have certain times for WhatsApp and stuff based on the conversations we've had, and I'm exactly like that. Like I'll only use the phone at certain points. So there clearly seems to me that there's a pattern with which you use technology. But I'm wondering if it's if you're just like the rest of people and all just consuming nonstop, or do you have proper consumption habits?
I've never thought about that. I've never thought about this question this way. I feel there is a I feel like I'm trying to become more conscious about consuming, and time boxing, consumption and even creation at specific times of the day. I feel like it also oscillates depending on the phase that you're in. Like right now, even as a company and as a person, I'm very much in this space of inquiry. So team is having a lot of like very, very, deep, interesting discussions. We're grappling with a lot of like complex problems. And you want to do those out of like the spotlight of social media. You want to like just go within as much as you can. So there's relatively little consumption. I have consciously tried to like in this year in particular, I've tried to like consume a lot less like news, daily news and things. I like there's this app that I love called the Economist Espresso. Have you used it?
I have not. No.
So if you subscribe to The Economist, they have this daily app, which basically it gives you like 5 one-paragraph stories from the day. And it's like a espresso shot of information and news, right? And that's pretty much the extent of the news that I'm reading. A couple of like technology blogs just to stay abreast. But otherwise, I feel like I'm trying to... I'm a little hesitant to categorize like some places as good content and other places as bad content, because I feel it's very individual. Like you can get inspired from anywhere, but I just know I know that for me, the kind of stuff that like inspires me and helps me make sense of the world, and I try and gravitate to those places as much as possible. So for instance, I still try and read as much fiction as I can. It's a challenge sometimes, but every day, like 20, 30 minutes, I'll devote time to a novel, because I feel like fiction just teaches you empathy and human emotions. And if you want to really understand the inner world, you're not going to learn that from like business books or like technology. I feel like you learn that from stories. So
I appreciate you saying that for everyone who's in the business world who doesn't believe that. Thank you for taking a stand on that. Because I am a firm believer. I learned so much through fiction. And there's something very didactic about nonfiction, no matter how quirkily it's written, no matter how academic it is, right? Because you're essentially, arguing about ideas, right? As opposed to worlds, which is massively different. With worlds, it's like you allow the reader agency and autonomy to let the characters breathe, become alive. Let their thoughts, the events in the book marinate in your head and take different turns. And it's almost like you read something at night, and some miraculous thing might happen where your subconscious will mingle with the story that you've read. And so when you wake up and read the book again, more stuff has happened. Like you've progressed beyond the pages of the book. It's hard to describe this feeling. I've been trying to like sort of understand why, fiction works for me better than nonfiction. Because I will devour fiction like anything. And I very much believe that when I read, and I love nonfiction as well, but the issue with nonfiction for me at least is that I think Tim Ferriss said this, you cannot read more than 2 nonfiction books at the same time. Because what they're basically doing is they have this model of reality. So you have to be invested in one model of reality to sort of make sense of it. And, especially if you're like me, I take my time to learn and slowly understand things as opposed to figuring it out from the get-go. And I find with fiction, you can read 3 stories at the same time. And they would be vastly different, and you can still sort of keep track. Like I'm reading what's his face? I'm reading Crime and Punishment right now by Dostoevsky. And I've heard so many things about great Russian writers, and I was like, let me put it to test. And it's a fantastic book. It's a brilliant book. So in that sense, talk to me about the 5 or 6 books that you love the most, that you've gifted to people that really are close to you.
Just one thought based on what you've said, actually, is that I feel, when with nonfiction, there's this pressure to be right? There's this pressure for writers to be right, and that pressure, it obviously has a very strong place in the world, and it helps guide so much of our work and thinking. Mm-hmm. But that pressure doesn't exist in fiction, right? It's not about right or wrong. It's not about like didactic splits. It's just, as you said, it's about living in a world and committing to that world. One of the things I really love about it is that fiction is like a commitment to empathy, right? Everyone in the business world as well is talking about like, oh, empathy. We need more empathy in the workplace. We need to understand each other. And we absolutely do. No one really has any solutions beyond that talking point, right? It's a difficult thing. How do you actually get to understand people? I mean, a lot of it starts with knowing yourself, right? And things like meditation can help. But I feel, and a friend shared this point with me actually, and she was, according to her, fiction is one of the greatest commitments to empathy, because unlike other mediums, so for instance, if you go and watch a film, right, you're committing to that story for like a couple of hours, right? And then you leave and you're back in your world. Whereas commitment, when you're reading a novel, assuming it's going to take you a little bit of time, like you're committing to those people and those characters for a week, a month. I'm reading Shantaram at the moment by Gregory David Roberts, and it's amazing book, right? And it's a meaty book. I think 900 pages. It's taking a while to get through. You're committing to his version of Mumbai. And all of those characters, right, the ones that you love and resonate with, and even the ones that you perhaps don't, and you share very different values, but you're observing them and witnessing them without judgment. And that doesn't happen in the world, right? Like in the world that we're navigating through and in the workplace, like you're always judging. You're always judging people for like what they're doing, either consciously or subconsciously. But in a fictional world, you drop that and you live it and you watch it. And then I feel, as you said, you're right. It's a really difficult thing to articulate, but it does, like those stories, they bleed into your identity, right? And they're always just like bubbling with the subconscious, and you don't know how it's changed you. But every time you read something, you feel like, in fact, I saw something on Twitter. I think it was it Sahil, the founder of Gumroads, he said that 80% of his personality is the current book that he's reading. And I feel like that's really true. That is.
I believe that. Yep.
That's so true. And to follow on from something else that you said about reading multiple books at the same time, one thing I realized is that I associate books not just because of their underlying stories, but I associate one book with another in moments of time, like when I was reading them together. So often I'm reading like a couple of books at once, and a book around whatever, So right now what am I reading? I'm listening to the audiobook of Creativity Inc. by the founder of Pixar. Listening to this again, it's a really inspiring and wonderful story. Reading a book on, it's called Creative Confidence, and it's by one of the founders of IDEO, the design innovation brand and company in the US. And it's all about how to cultivate creativity and build your own creative confidence. And reading Shantaram, right?
Fantastic.
So I feel like reading these books, there is this constant interplay between the three of them. And whenever I'm jotting down things or making notes, it's in the context of all three books, not just individually. So, and I feel like there's something really magical about that synthesis. You could be reading completely wildly different things, and yet you're sort of consciously or unconsciously connecting dots between them. And that's where your biggest leaps and breakthroughs happen as well, I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's stay on this train for a while, because I am reading. Is it fine if we go on for 15 more minutes? Or do you have something else to do?
No, I'm free. Let's do it.
Fantastic. Yeah,
Has it been 90 minutes already?
Yep. We've been talking for a while.
Wow. Okay.
I'm reading Robert Sapolsky's Behave, which is a book on evolutionary biology, because I was just fascinated by getting that side of things. I felt like I was always, more creative, whimsical, and I wanted to make myself believe that I could do that. And I'm reading, Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, and I'm reading Tribe, right? So it's 3 different books, just like you. And it's funny that all of my conversations are fixated to almost fanatical level of trying to somehow impose the hypothesis, the working models in these books onto my real world to see how they make sense. And so my friends, just like that guy Asile's tweet, my friends will often say, I get fixated on ideas and I try to make sense of my world using their lens, which is a dangerous thing to do. But it's so much fun because you are able to sort of develop your ability to think laterally and become a systems thinker, which I think is fantastic, right? Because you're able to sort of see the world with all, the fact that I'm still wondering, I haven't read, Crime and Punishment for the last 2 days, and I'm still wondering what happens to Raskolnikov, and I'm really worried for him. And I want to sort of get to where he goes to in his journey next, because he just murdered this woman and the pawnbroker and her stepsister, and he's in all sorts of troubles. He's barely eating and stuff, and he's in a mess, but he has these murderous impulses. I want to see where he gets to, because I'm worried for him. At the same time, I also want to know how Sapolsky explains endocrinology to me. I'm also interested in that. And yet at the same time, I also want to reread some of the things that Junger is writing about, Sebastian Junger is writing about, our need for community. And I'm trying to think about how I can use the learnings from these books as I go and play with my friend, and we, throw boomerangs, because I have this weird boomerang showpiece that I bought from Australia once, and it's just a showpiece, but it actually works like a boomerang. So it's like these things do not make sense at all. What I'm talking about right now, or what you were talking about as well. But it's just weird. It's like it's almost like you're playing with ideas and you're playing them out in real life, and then seeing if they hold true or not. And it's a mental playground. Yeah. That was a very long tangent. I don't know where I was going with that, but anyway.
No, I feel like one of the themes in what you're saying is that sometimes you read with an agenda, right? You're reading for something actionable, right? And I feel like for me, that's my least favorite kind of reading, actually. When you're reading for okay, I need a framework or a template. I need to read this so that I can exactly. So I figure out, again, it's coming down to you're reading with the destination in mind, as opposed to reading for the pursuit of play and joy itself. And I feel like, it's a tricky one, but which is why, again, it's nice to read fiction, because it's not really going to help you, right? You're trying to get a job, right? You're trying to raise money. Shantaram's not really going to do much for you, right? I mean, understand the psyche of the slumlord. That's not really going to, help you build out your company. But it does, I feel, help you inquire into the human condition and that is one of the noblest things of all, right? I think that's one of the most important pursuits and why we're here. So
Yeah, absolutely. Have you watched Gangs of Wasseypur?
I haven't. It's been on my, I definitely.
That movie is a Bible for rustic India, for anyone who's ever wanted to inquire into it seriously. It allowed me to gain vocabulary which I didn't have before, and like that thing you said earlier about how you consider yourself so unique that you feel like you won't be able to relate to people, but you'd be surprised that you're not unique, and people actually will create something that'll hit you right in that place where you think, this is my protected fortress of my own original ideas, right? And someone will do the exact same thing and hit you there, and you are in half parts disbelief and half parts awe, and like a slight part jealousy, like fuck. That's it's just one of those great movies that even if you don't necessarily speak Hindi, that you would just love even if you watch with subtitles, because it is very much about Indian society. It's a very interesting critique on that, because it's all about how funny collectivism is, and how families will inherit blood and revenge, and it's a great movie. Having said that, what is because I want to get back to the question, what are some books that you love recommending to people, or that have positively changed your life? 5 books.
5 books. I always struggle with questions like this, because how do you reduce it down to 5, right?
Let's do infinite.
Yeah. So top of mind, I already mentioned The Golden Gate to you by Vikram Seth, just because I feel like it's just a beautiful expression of literature. Linked to that, the book that actually inspired his piece of work was by a Russian author. You were mentioning Russian literature earlier, so it's by a book by Pushkin called Evgeny Onegin, which is a novel in verse as well, about a man in Russia, and it's really like remarkable story. One book that's massively, I think, influenced my thinking in recent times is Robert Pirsig's Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
I've heard of that.
Remarkable book. I mean, I aspire to write something like that one day. I mean, it's essentially it's this juxtaposition between a motorcycle trip that is happening between a father, his son, and some friends, and he's narrating that trip. And it's also this parallel inquiry into values and philosophy, and this consistent question that is, what is quality, right? That one question, and the protagonist obsesses about that one question, and how do you define the notion of quality? And I feel like, again, some books come into your life at a really meaningful point in time, right? So I've always loved motorcycles. My parents never let me ride one when I was younger. It's funny, again, interesting. Since we're going back, we're discussing childhood and cultural quirks earlier. So when I was 14, I met my mother's friend from college, who's a palmist. Right.
Oh, interesting. I have a serious fixation for palmistry. It's unhealthy. But yeah, go on.
Right. So and I was just being skeptical and arrogant and whatever. And I was like, oh, can you read my palm? So when my mother and I were in college, she apparently read my mother's palm, and my mother wrote this down. She said you'd have 2 sons, right? Mm-hmm. There'd be around 5 years between them. The older son, he'd be pursuing a creative life, and the younger one, he'll be a very science kind of a guy. And that kind of manifested. My brother is doing a PhD in number theory, and he's on his way to being a mathematician. And I'm doing this stuff. So my mother really swore by it. She said, oh, you should speak with her. So she looked at my palm and she said, okay, this boy, he's quite reckless. And has high propensity for risk. So don't get him a car. Basically, don't let him drive till he's 25. Yeah. And I think when you're 14, 15 in high school, everyone's getting really excited that, okay, you can start learning to drive when you're 16 and 17. And I was thinking about bikes and all of this. And my mother really emotionally blackmailed me. I said, come on, all of this, I'm not going to like listen to her, right? It'll be completely fine. And she was like, beta, you know, you can do it, but I won't feel safe or happy. And I was like, oh, real conflict. I was like, you can't tell me that. I mean, so anyways, I said, let it go. But anyway, so in recent times, in the last year, I took a couple of motorcycle classes, and I bought a Royal Enfield motorcycle, and I read this book, and I've been like, in the company, actually in the team, we have like 5 or 6 guys who ride bikes. So we do like a monthly ride somewhere. And it's amazing. And when you read this book as well, you connect to that experience in a whole new way. So
I wanted to say the entire, when you were saying that story, I was like, this is my life playing out. My parents were like, you know, you can drive a car, you can't ride a motorbike. And that was such a point of contention in my childhood, because all my friends were like these kids who were basically driving around mopeds way before, like, you know, in India, the license age, let's just say, is not really enforced properly. And so I see all these kids driving around mopeds, and I had to be fucking, you know, chauffeured around everywhere. And I hated that. I hated that so much. Yeah. Because for me, the two-wheeler represented freedom that I wasn't able to get.
Absolutely.
Right? It was true freedom, because it's almost like, you know, it's like, it's a cyborg. It's an extension of who you are, just like a musical instrument is an extension of who you are. And so it's a mechanical extension of who you are. And you can take it to places the same way you would take yourself to places, by walking, right? Or by thinking about something. And so I hated the fact. And so any instance I would get, I would find, even if I had to sit billion, I would sneak away from my house and just go with friends who did not have cars, but who had mopeds, just so I could be on those and feel that sense of freedom, that sense of, you know, riding around on speed breakers, dodging the cops. It was very much, you know, an exercise in rebellion and wanting to assert my freedom, because I hated the fact of having to wait for my mom or dad or the driver, and just like, you know, having that sort of divide between everyone who was having fun and me who was not having fun, because I was, you know, confined in this car. And so even to this day, I will, even in the games that I'm playing, whether it's GTA or something else, I always prefer a bike, because and very recently, last year, I was like, I have to learn how to ride a bike. I'm 23, I'm turning 22 now, so I have to. And so the way I learned riding a bike is in the midst of the Leh-Ladakh highway, which is scary as fuck. But,
wow.
So what happened is my friend and I, it was me, him, he's the adventurer in our group, like he's a proper mountaineer and everything. And his sister and I went to this trip up in Leh-Ladakh, and I was on this, you know, whole no caffeine, no marijuana, no nicotine, all those things. And so initially they rented a nice ass bike, like a classic Avenger. And I got that shitty moped, and I would just, you know, cruise behind them. And, hello? Dhrupad?
Hey.
Yeah, hold on. I think, hold on for a sec. Hold on for 1 sec. Hello?
Hey. Yeah, you're back.
Yeah, what's up? So I would say, so I got that shitty moped, and I would just trail behind them, because they had the ability to change gears and, you know, drive faster. And I'd hate that. And then eventually what happened is I was like, you know, fuck it, let's just return this scooter back. I wanna feel what you feel. So teach me how to ride this bike. And he's like, okay, well, we're at this rental place, and the highway is right next to it. This is the only place you can train. I'll ride with you, right next to you. And lo and behold, we started doing it. Initially, I was scared, because that machine is huge. See, a scooter, like a moped, right? A moped is personable. You can sort of, it's in your control. No matter how lanky you are, it's small and compact enough to really sort of hone it in and, like, you know, for the lack of a better word, and excuse my French, you know, make it a bitch. But a bike has a mind of its own. A bike is vicious. That's a vicious machine, right? It's bigger. It's more powerful. It has more, like, you know, stuff in it. And so I failed miserably. You know, I pressed the clutch too hard, mismanaged the gears and stuff. But eventually what started happening is I started to learn that, you know, the faster your wheels go, the more stable you become. And I started to get more comfortable with speed, braking. Fell a couple of times, sure. But I will never forget that experience. And till this date, if I find a bike, I'm going to ride it. And it's literally been a Zen experience without reading the book.
Please read the book. Yeah. The book was written for people like you, and so much of what you said deeply resonates. I feel like, and I was going to mention it, and you did that. Ultimately, a bike is like a multi-dimensional metaphor for freedom, right? Because in a car, you are in a metallic box.
Yes.
Right. And it's not just about the phase of life that you're in, like you're 16 and you want independence, but you are physically in a metallic box. So in the book, and I won't ruin any more of it for you because you will enjoy reading it and experiencing it firsthand. But he describes the distinction so beautifully that, in a car, you're watching the scenes, you're watching the world in a frame, right, of the window, and you're watching the scenes go by. On a bike, you are the scene, right? You're in it. You're the protagonist on that road, not just a bystander or a consumer of it. You will love it. Also what came to mind since we're discussing like the kind of division and tensions between fiction and nonfiction, one of the things I loved about this book, it's that it's incredibly difficult to classify, right? Yeah. At one point, it feels like it is literally a manual on how to maintain a motorcycle because it's incredibly technical, right? And through the story, it's technical in all aspects. Like the writer doesn't mess around at all. Like there's no detail that is too small. So, the protagonist is literally maintaining his motorcycle every time they're stopping at these like diners on the American highway as they're like driving, and he's going through incredible levels of detail when when there are issues with the chain or the anything or the gears he describes that in a lot of detail. It feels like it's a technical manual at times. Other times it feels like it is genuinely a very hardcore academic text in philosophy, and it's difficult to read at times. There are chapters where you feel like giving up because it's like, okay, I'm in a place I don't even understand and I can't even connect to. And then suddenly he'll switch to a beautiful story between like a father and a son, right? And a father who is bipolar and exists as like these two characters and has gone through like electroshock therapy. And in fact, isn't that, I feel like oftentimes when we see like really great, really meaningful work, it is difficult to classify, right? It's not this or that. It's something that like, you don't even want to put a label on because it would be reductive. It would actually reduce, and it's nice just to leave it like some things just leave unarticulated, as we were saying earlier.
Yeah, think about
and unbranded.
Yeah, think about Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen. That's a classic. That is a testament to what you said. Yeah, man, fucking. I was gonna say, there's a special downloadable expansion pack in GTA 4 called The Lost and the Damned, which is about a biker gang. It's about this biker gang that operates in one of the many boroughs in New York, and they refer to cars as, I hate this cage. They'll never use the word car, but they'll use cage, right?
That's great.
and they all ride American choppers. And for the faster sort of Japanese bikes, they'll call them hair dryers. So their metaphorical language is fucking amazing. Here's what I would recommend you back if you ever have a console, right? I always play games with stories for the story. I never play it for like the sandbox style environment where you just randomly go kill people, because I'm interested in how much of storytelling acumen has gone into making it a game that allows you to feel like you're reading a novel, except the choices are sort of predetermined, but there's also the beauty of seeing your choices play out in real time in the game. So it's a great game for that. Do you play video games at all?
I've never been much of a gamer, but I'm always fascinated by games like that, where they're just like, I don't know, loaded in story and metaphor. Yeah. Like the act of gaming, it's funny. Like when I was, going back to like peer pressure, I literally forced myself to get a console, a PlayStation 1, just because like everyone at school had them and they seemed to be playing FIFA and Crash Bandicoot and all these games all the time. And I was like, I need to start doing that, because I don't have anything to talk about. And I enjoyed it for a period of time, but like I never got that crazy bug. But then in more recent times, I feel like there have been, I'm not I really haven't, I don't know that many games, but games like, there was the mobile game called Monument Valley. Have you played that?
I haven't heard of it. That sounds fascinating. What is it?
It's like, you're basically this princess, and you are navigating these like geometric worlds that have different laws of physics, and it's beautifully designed. The sound, it's a meditation. Actually, you just put on your headphones and you live in that world, and it's
what is it called?
Monument Valley.
Interesting. Yeah, there's is it a Mac game, or do you play it on your phone?
You play it on your phone. Okay. And you're basically solving these, like, I mean, it's essentially like problem solving and solving puzzles and spatial reasoning, but like those are all really, again, like really bad attempts at actually trying to describe what it is. You're navigating through these different worlds, and you keep encountering these different kinds of people. So there's the crow people who you have to avoid. Then there's this ghost and this spirit that speaks to you like every chapter. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's also like, whatever games I played, I've really enjoyed those kind of more infinite games where there's no necessarily end in sight and there's no objective, right? Yeah. It's just about living in the game for some time. And that's always, I feel like I've changed my view on a lot of this from when I was younger. I used to feel like games were not actually going to, like, I think probably a function of parenting as well. A lot of time parents will tell you, like, don't waste your time playing video games, right? And I feel like I internalized a lot of that. And actually, that's awful advice. The advice should be, don't waste your time being passive, right? Because games are incredible and are real like conduits for social change as well. Like a good game with a good story can change the way that you see the world, right? On Apple Arcade, there are these really powerful games. There's this one game I played a few months ago where you are I think you're a girl who is in depression and locked in her house.
I was going to mention that game. I was going to say that game. And yeah, and so the way you go through that game is you have, so different colors will return to your life based on how you're able to progress to your problems, right? For the first color that will return is red, and then blue, and then so on and so forth, right? And it's really simple. You just have to find problems, right? You have to find solutions to problems. You're not looking carefully. That sometimes all you have to do to get to the next place is to jump. Whether you're trying to like crawl or something else, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's so powerful because it's just it just shows, like, again, when you're feeling low or you've been in a state of depression, it's about those little tasks, right? And making it through the day and atomizing the day in a way that into like manageable chunks. And that game is about that. It's not about like saving the world or ending the world or to like shooting down, snipers there's nothing dramatic about it. It's just like living. You're seeing the world through the eyes of like a girl who's depressed and is just trying to make it through the day and navigate her room and her house. And I feel like, you could you could watch a documentary about depression or read a book on psychology, and you will never really internalize what it means to be someone, right, in depression. Even through a game, you can't fully, but you have much, I feel, deeper appreciation for like the struggles and the challenges. So games are incredibly powerful. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, Dhrupad. What you mentioned there, by the way, is how do I even describe this? It's like, there are, like you mentioned, infinite games, right? Those are great for actual infinite games in life that you can just play. It's like, writing, this is an infinite game for me, right? And those games, like, fucking hate to use Candy Crush as an example, but like, it's an infinite game, right? You keep playing.
Yeah.
But then, games like this, right, are actually a testament to how you can sort of make things better by slowly and methodically fixing whatever you can fix one step at a time. I'll be honest, very weirdly, no amount of books around US history or what happens in the US could train me for my life there. But you know what? What did? I played almost all of the GTA games. And what is really interesting about GTA is that they have parodies of culture. So
Right.
so instead of Facebook, they'll have Life Hacker, right? And instead of Twitter, they have Bleater. For every single thing that you will find in real life, they have a parody alternative. And in that way, I learned like this bizarre way of like understanding what the US was about. For example, if you're like driving around in Los Santos in GTA 5, the radio will have this ad that says vote for Proposition 245, legalize cocaine, right? And it's you sort of start to get an idea of, okay, this is what the culture looks like, this is what they are like, right? So there's clearly you get people to vote based on, like you petition. I mean, you champion a certain cause, certain law, and then people get behind it, like, oh, that makes sense. Oh, it's a country that likes talk shows, huh? Interesting. And then I played what's the other face, Assassin's Creed 3, which is basically a game with that is at the sort of start of the British invading, the British leaving the USA, the fights between the loyalists and the patriots, and that teaches you a whole bunch about US history, because you can just parse through the entries. So, for example, every single time you meet a new historical character, like if you meet William Faulkner, they'll have like an entry that you can open and check out all that you need to know about him. So you're playing the game and you're learning about them. And I was so well prepared when I got there, because people would be surprised by how I knew stuff about their country, albeit in a funny, sarcastic sense, because I'd played these games. So yeah, man, it's weird. I've learned a lot from these games.
Amazing to hear.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Dhrupad, it has been fucking amazing talking to you, man. It's I was fumbling at times because I wasn't sure where to take things next, but I applaud you for being an amazing conversationalist and responding very well to what were sometimes ill-formed questions on my end. So thank you for that.
No, I love the questions, and I really love the format. I feel like it's very real, and it's just very true. There's no curation. There's no excessive preparation. So thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, man. Yeah. It's funny that, in conversations, you don't know where you're heading. You're sort of like in the dark, just like that, that book about my motorcycles, right? It's like, you don't know where you're heading, right? So
yeah,
every once in a while you come off as coherent. Every once in a while you say something dumb, and you just keep iterating and getting better. Where can people follow you?
Where can people follow me? I guess Twitter is where I'm pretty active, at Dhrupad Karwa, and Twitter and LinkedIn essentially. So just search my name, I'm there. And of course in the HaikuJam app as well. So if you want to write with me, I'm at Dhru. So you can get the app. It's on Android at the moment, and we can create some things together there.
And are you opening beta testing for Get Inspo or no?
We will be later in the year. So right now, if you go to getinspo.co, you can join a waitlist, and then you'll get an email from myself or my co-founder, just like you did, scheduling a quick Zoom call, and and then we'll onboard you through that as well. And then we're looking at potentially opening up to the public later in the year, but it's going to take a few months.
Thank you so much, Dhrupad. It's been a blast. Take care, man.
Thank you, dude. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
See you, Evan.